My name is Kendra. I'm 28 years old, and 3 nights before my mother's retirement party, I was standing in the stockroom of the grocery store where I worked when my phone lit up with a message that changed everything. Don't you dare show up at Mom's retirement party this Friday. I stared at the screen, read it twice, then typed back, "What do you mean?" The reply came almost instantly. "Because you're useless. Mom and Dad are embarrassed to have you there." I actually laughed once, not because it was funny, but because when someone finally says the cruel thing out loud, it stops being confusing. A second later, my father called. His voice was flat, businesslike, as if he were negotiating with a stranger. "If you want to come, pay off our $50,000 debt, then you'll be part of this family." I said, "I don't have that kind of money." In the background, I heard Linda, my mother, grab the phone and scream, "Then don't show your face." The line went dead. I stood there in the half-dark, holding a box cutter in one hand and my phone in the other, while an old memory flashed through my head like a bad film splice. Me at 16, holding a birthday cake I bought myself, waiting for people who never came. That was the moment something inside me went quiet in a dangerous way. Not broken. Clear. If my family wanted a price for my presence, I had a question of my own, and 3 days to make sure they'd regret ever asking it. Before I tell you what I asked, and why they started begging me to come home, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I want to see just how far this story reaches. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the same three voices again. My sister's contempt, my father's cold bargain, my mother's scream. And each one landed on a different wound that had never really healed. By morning, I wasn't sad anymore. Sadness is soft. What I felt was sharper than that, like a wire pulled tight through my ribs. At work, I moved through the aisles on autopilot, stacking cereal boxes, scanning damaged inventory, smiling at customers, while inside my head I was replaying years of small humiliations I had tried to pretend were normal. The Christmas when they forgot to save me a seat at dinner. The graduation they skipped because Sophie had a minor award ceremony the same day. The family group photo where I was asked to take the picture instead of be in it. People always imagine abuse as one dramatic event, one unforgettable explosion. What they don't understand is that sometimes it's death by 1,000 practical decisions. You are excluded so often that eventually, everyone acts like you were never meant to be included in the first place. Around noon, I texted the only person who had ever seen through my family's performance. Mia. "Are you free after work? I need to talk before I do something reckless." She replied almost immediately. "Park bench. 7. And don't talk yourself out of telling me everything." When I met her, the sky was turning that washed-out gray that makes everything feel exposed. I told her about the text, the debt, the threat, the party, all of it. I expected her to say, "Ignore them," because that's what she used to tell me years ago. Back then, Mia believed peace was always better than confrontation, but she looked at me differently this time, like she was finally seeing the full shape of what I had survived. "Kendra," she said quietly, "they're not asking for money. They're selling you humiliation and calling it family." That sentence hit me harder than anything else had, because she was right. This wasn't about debt. It wasn't even about the party. It was about control, about forcing me to kneel one more time so they could enjoy the sight of it. I asked her, "What if I stop protecting them?" Mia held my gaze. "Then stop halfway. Either stay silent and let them keep rewriting who you are, or tell the truth and be ready to live with what follows." On the drive home, I kept hearing that line, "Tell the truth and be ready." In my apartment, I propped my phone against a mug on my kitchen table and stared at my own reflection on the front-facing camera. I didn't hit record yet. Instead, Memories came in jagged flashes, like someone splicing horror footage into a confession tape. Sophie laughing when Linda called me the practice child. George telling me after I lost an internship. Some people just don't have the drive gene. Linda introducing Sophie as our successful daughter at a barbecue, while I stood right there holding a tray of drinks. I opened the Notes app and started writing a script, but it didn't sound right. Too polished. Too safe. So I deleted it and wrote a single question at the top of the page. What kind of parents charge admission to their daughter's love? That was the first true sentence. Then another came. Then another. Soon I wasn't writing a script. I was building an indictment. I included the debt demand, the exclusion, the years of favoritism, the little rituals of public shaming they had disguised as jokes. And when I finished, I read it aloud and realized my voice didn't shake. That scared me more than anger would have, because anger burns fast. Clarity lasts. Before bed, I drafted one more line for the end of the video. If your image is so fragile that my truth can destroy it, maybe the problem was never me. I set my alarm, plugged in my phone, and lay in the dark listening to the refrigerator hum like static. Tell me honestly, if your own family told you to pay for the right to belong, would you still call that love? Comment below. Would you stay silent, or would you make them hear you? The next morning, I called out of work for the first time in almost a year. I told my manager I had a family emergency, and for once, I didn't feel guilty saying it. By 10:30, my apartment looked less like a home and more like a witness stand. I pulled the curtains halfway open for light, stacked 3 books under my phone so the angle was level, and sat down at the table with a glass of water I never touched. I tried twice to record the video and deleted both takes. In one, I sounded too angry. In the other, too wounded. I didn't want pity. I wanted precision. On the third try, I spoke the truth the way surgeons cut. Steady hands, no wasted movement. Hi, my name is Kendra. I'm 28 years old, and this week my sister told me not to come to my mother's retirement party because my parents are embarrassed by me. Then my father told me that if I wanted to attend, I had to pay off their $50,000 debt first. When I said I couldn't, my mother screamed that I shouldn't show my face. I paused there, looked straight into the camera, and let the silence do some of the work. Then I told the part no one outside the family had ever heard. How I had spent years being treated as the embarrassing extra. How they praised me in private only when they needed something, then erased me in public when I didn't fit the polished story they wanted to sell. I named the pattern, not just the pain. That mattered. People don't always believe emotion, but they recognize systems. I talked about being excluded, mocked, measured, and finally priced. I held up screenshots of the text exchange. I repeated my father's exact words. I did not cry. I think that unsettled the truth even more. At the end, I said, "This is not a misunderstanding. This is what happens when people mistake control for parenting and shame for discipline. And if my family is angry that I said it publicly, maybe they should have thought about that before making cruelty their private language." My thumb hovered over the post button for a full 5 seconds. My heartbeat was so loud I could hear it in my ears. Then I pressed upload. For 2 minutes, nothing happened. I almost laughed at myself for believing the world would care. Then the first comment appeared. Then 10 more. Then 50. By noon, the video had crossed 20,000 views. By 1 o'clock, it was past 100,000. By 3, a large account that posted family trauma stories reshared it with the caption, "When toxic parents finally meet a daughter with receipts." After that, it exploded. People started stitching my video, telling their own stories. Strangers wrote paragraphs saying they had never heard their lives explained so clearly. One woman commented, "My dad made me pay rent at 17 but funded my brother's wedding at 24. I thought I was crazy until now." Another said, The calm in your voice is terrifying, and I mean that as a compliment. But not all the comments came from strangers. Someone tagged Sophie. Then one of Linda's old coworkers commented, "I'm shocked. Your mother always talked like family was everything." That one drew hundreds of replies. At 4:12 p.m., Sophie texted, "What the hell did you do?" At 4:13, "Take it down." At 4:14, "Do you realize people know who we are?" I didn't answer. Then she called. I let it ring twice before picking up. She didn't even say hello. "Are you insane?" she shouted. "Mom's friends are calling. People are sending this around. Do you know how humiliating this is?" I leaned back in my chair and asked the question that changed the entire week. Humiliating for who, Sophie? For the people who did it? Or the person who finally said it out loud? She went silent for half a second, and in that silence I heard panic. Real panic. Not because I had lied, because I hadn't. She started yelling again, calling me dramatic, unstable, selfish, cruel. But beneath every insult was fear. Fear of losing the family's performance, fear of being seen standing beside it. Fear that for once I had gotten to the audience first. When she finally stopped to breathe, I said, "You told me not to come because I was useless. Now suddenly my voice matters a lot." Then I hung up. By evening, the video had passed 500,000 views. A local blogger wrote about it. People dug up public posts from Linda bragging about family values and filled the comments with questions she couldn't delete fast enough. My phone kept buzzing until midnight. But the most interesting part wasn't the volume. It was the shift. For the first time in my life, they were the ones reacting to me. They were no longer the authors. They were damage control. Be honest. Would you ever post the truth about your family if you knew it might burn the whole lie down? Comment below. Should Kendra take the video down or let it keep spreading? By Thursday morning, the story had moved beyond my phone. At work, 2 coworkers avoided eye contact. One hugged me in the stockroom without saying a word, and my assistant manager quietly asked if I needed to leave early because it looked like the internet was eating your family alive. That turned out to be less of an exaggeration than either of us realized. During my lunch break, Mia slid into the booth across from me at a diner near the store and dropped her phone on the table. "You need to see this," she said. Linda, my mother, who had spent years policing every image, every smile, every wrinkle in public, had disabled comments on 2 of her social accounts. Her retirement celebration page had been flooded with people asking whether it was true she told her own daughter not to show up without paying family debt. George's small contracting business page had a dozen new one-star reviews from people saying they didn't trust someone who treated family like a transaction. And Sophie, who worked in client relations for a wellness brand that loved to market sisterhood and compassion, had been tagged in my video so many times that her coworkers had started whispering about it in the office. "Oh," I said, staring at the screen. Mia gave me a long look. "You still think this is just about your hurt feelings?" She was right. The fallout had moved into the one place my family always protected harder than the truth: reputation. Around 3 that afternoon, George called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity is a powerful thing. His voice sounded different now. Not softer, exactly, but frayed. "You need to delete that video today," he said. "This has gone too far." I asked. "Past what point? Past the part where you sold my invitation? Or past the part where other people found out?" He exhaled hard. "Clients are asking questions." There it was. Not, "You're hurt." Not, "We handled this wrong." Clients. Money. Image. I said, "So now you understand consequences." He tried a different tactic then, the familiar paternal authority that had once worked on me so easily. "You are destroying this family over a private matter." I said, "No, Dad. I'm exposing what you kept private because privacy was the only thing protecting you." He cursed under his breath and hung up. An hour later, Linda sent me a direct message. Not, "Kendra, please talk to me." Not, "Can we fix this?" It read, "You need to remove your lies immediately or there will be consequences." I stared at that sentence for a full minute, then took a screenshot and posted it to my story with one line. "For everyone asking whether my parents have reflected yet, here's today's answer." That story alone got reshared thousands of times. By evening, the retirement party venue's public post had comments all over it asking whether the family drama was the reason the guest list had changed. Sophie finally called again, but this time she didn't sound furious. She sounded brittle. "Do you know what people at work are saying?" she asked. "They're sending me your clip in group chats." I said, "That sounds uncomfortable." She snapped, "Stop acting smart. You're ruining lives." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loudly, just once. "Sophie, you texted me that our parents were embarrassed to have me there. Why should I care whether embarrassment has finally changed addresses?" That shut her up for a second. Then she said something that revealed more than she intended. "You could have just talked to us." I almost admired the audacity. "Talk to you?" I said. "The last time I tried, you told me I was jealous, dramatic, and lucky anyone still put up with me." Her breathing changed. I knew I had cornered her with memory, and memory is hard to argue with when the other person knows you're right. That night, I uploaded a second, shorter video. Not a rant, not a revenge speech. Just facts, screenshots, dates. A calm explanation of what public image maintenance looks like inside some families. It passed 300,000 views in a few hours. The comments got even sharper. People weren't just sympathizing anymore, they were recognizing a pattern. This is textbook scapegoating. They wanted a daughter-shaped punching bag. Notice how they only care after witnesses arrive. Linda's former bridge club friends began unfollowing her. George's business partner called him to step back temporarily until things cooled off. Sophie's company announced an internal review after employees raised concerns about her conduct online. I sat on my couch that night, phone warm in my hand, and realized something almost frightening. I had spent years believing I was powerless because they had taught me to measure power the way they did. Money, status, approval, invitation. But narrative is power too. Evidence is power. Timing is power. And I had all three. If your parents threatened to cut you off unless you protected their image, what would you choose? Peace or truth? Comment below. Do you think Linda and George were actually sorry, or were they just terrified of public shame? Friday came, the day of the retirement party, and I woke up to 37 missed notifications and an unfamiliar calm that felt almost holy. The kind of calm that comes when fear has finally exhausted itself and leaves nothing behind but purpose. I made coffee, ignored every message from family, and got ready for my shift like it was any other day. I wore the same plain name tag, the same black sneakers, the same sweater I always wore when the grocery store air conditioning turned the produce aisle into a refrigerator. There was something satisfying about that. While my family scrambled to protect their polished event, I was stacking oranges and clocking in on time. But by noon, the day turned. A customer recognized me from the video and whispered, "You're brave," while handing me a coupon. A teenage cashier I barely knew muttered, "My mom treats me like that too," then looked away before I could answer. And just before my break, my manager pulled me aside and said gently, "Your sister is outside." I stepped through the automatic doors and found Sophie standing near the cart return, sunglasses on even though the sky was overcast. She looked like someone trying to disguise herself from consequences that could already smell her. "We need to talk," she said. "Here?" I asked. "Because I'm at work, and you've usually been very concerned about professionalism." Her jaw tightened. "This isn't funny." No, I said. It really isn't. She lowered her voice. Mom's party starts in 4 hours. Vendors are calling. People are canceling. Aunt Renee says if that video stays up, she's not coming because she doesn't want to be associated with a scandal. Dad is losing his mind. Mom won't stop crying. I crossed my arms. And? Sophie stared at me like she couldn't understand why those words weren't automatic weapons anymore. And you need to fix this. I took one step closer. Say the whole sentence. She blinked. What? Say what you actually mean. Not fix this. Say what you want from me. Her lips parted, then pressed together. She hated this. The precision. The forced honesty. Finally, she said, take the videos down. Post that you exaggerated. Come to the party. Smile. Help us get through tonight. There it was. Not an apology. A stage direction. I laughed in her face that time. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because the sheer arrogance of it deserved no gentler response. You told me not to show up because I was useless, I said. Now you want me there to rescue the event you built on humiliating me. She hissed. You always do this. You always make everything harder than it has to be. No, Sophie. I make people say out loud what they were hoping to hide. She glanced toward the entrance and lowered her tone even further. My boss saw the video. That was the first honest sentence she had spoken all day. I held her gaze. And? Her shoulders stiffened. HR wants to talk to me Monday. They said my messages could reflect poorly on the company. She swallowed. People in the office are avoiding me. There it was. The first real crack in her armor. Not tears. Consequences. I felt no thrill exactly. More like confirmation. Actions had finally connected to outcomes. That sounds familiar, I said. Being treated differently because of what your family says about you. She flinched. I think that hurt her more than yelling would have. Maybe because for 1 second, she understood I was making her stand where I had stood for years. She stepped closer and tried a different angle. You want revenge? Fine. You win. Are you happy? I looked at her carefully. No. Happy would have been having a sister who didn't text me that our parents were ashamed of me. Her face changed then, anger giving way to something uglier and smaller. Fear. If Mom's event falls apart, she'll never forgive you, I said. That implies I'm still waiting for forgiveness. Then, because I wanted the truth to land where it could echo, I took out my phone, hit record, and said, my sister came to my workplace today to ask me to lie publicly so our mother's retirement party could survive the consequences of what they did. Sophie recoiled. Are you serious? Very. She tried to cover her face and turned away, but not before 2 employees on break saw enough to recognize her. One of them murmured, That's the sister? Which carried farther than they intended. Sophie panicked. Turn that off. Why? I asked. Do you only believe in privacy when it protects you? She stared at me with naked hatred, but this time it didn't scare me. Hatred from powerless people usually sounds a lot like desperation. She spat. You'll always be the family embarrassment. I answered, calm as winter. Then it must be humiliating to need me this badly. She left after that, fast, shoulders rigid, heels clicking like little explosions across the parking lot. 20 minutes later, I posted the clip. It went viral faster than the first one. By late afternoon, people were tracking the retirement party through public posts and noting how empty the room looked. Several guests had backed out. One vendor publicly confirmed the family had tried to pressure him into removing tagged photos. Around 6, just as the party was supposed to begin, I got a message from an unknown number. Please call your mother. I didn't. At 7:13, George left a voicemail I saved forever. He sounded nothing like the man who had told me to buy my way in. He sounded cornered. Kendra, enough. Just come home. We can work this out. And for the first time in my life, I smiled because I understood something completely. They didn't want me because they loved me. They wanted me because I had become the one thing standing between them and total collapse. Comment below. Should Kendra show up to the party after all? Or should she let the whole thing burn without lifting a finger? I did not go to the retirement party. I went home, locked my apartment door, changed into sweatpants, and watched the night unfold through 100 glowing windows on my phone. One guest posted a blurry photo of half-empty tables and quickly deleted it, but not before it got captured and reshared. Someone else uploaded a video of Linda at the podium, trying to smile through a speech, while whispers moved through the room like smoke. George was seen arguing with a man near the entrance. Later, I learned it was one of his oldest friends, who had come only to ask whether the debt story was true. By 10 o'clock, the event that had been planned for months had turned into a public autopsy of their reputation. The next morning, the consequences accelerated. George's business partner formally suspended him from client-facing work. 2 long-standing customers canceled contracts. Linda's retirement committee removed her from a community mentorship spotlight that had been scheduled for the following month. Sophie texted me 3 times before noon. I might lose my job. Mom isn't getting out of bed. What do you want from us? That last question was the first useful thing anyone in my family had asked me all week. I let it sit for hours before answering. Public truth, public apology, no rewriting. She replied instantly, "Dad will never do that." I wrote back, "Then enjoy the private consequences of public cruelty." By evening, George called from an unknown number. This time I answered. "What exactly are you demanding?" he asked. No fake concern, no fatherly tone, just exhaustion and anger with the edges burned off. I said, "I'm not demanding anything. I'm describing what accountability looks like. You wanted me to pay $50,000 to be treated like a daughter for one evening. Now you can pay with honesty for maybe a chance at being a family again." He said nothing, so I continued. "You and Linda post a video apology. You confirm the debt demand was real. You admit I was excluded and mistreated. You stop calling me unstable, difficult, dramatic, or ungrateful. You do not ask me to take anything down." And Sophie apologizes publicly for the message she sent. He actually laughed once in disbelief. "You think we're going to humiliate ourselves online?" That word again, humiliate. As if truth were humiliation and cruelty were only unfortunate if observed. I answered, "No, I think you already did that. I'm offering you the shortest route through the wreckage." He hung up. Sunday was quiet until it wasn't. Around 3 in the afternoon, Mia called me and said, "Open Facebook now." George had posted a statement, not an apology. A statement. It said the family was going through a painful private misunderstanding and asked for compassion as they healed. It was the kind of polished non-language people use when they hope vagueness can still save them. The comments destroyed it. "So did you charge your daughter to attend?" Is the text fake? Why not deny it directly? This sounds like legal panic. Within an hour, Linda posted a photo of a candle with the caption, "A mother's heart suffers in silence." That one made people even angrier. By sunset, several of Linda's closest social friends had unfriended her. Sophie's company placed her on leave pending review. George's partner removed his bio from the business website. They had tried deflection and found out what happens when the audience already has evidence. At 8:41 p.m., my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw George and Linda standing in the hallway like 2 people who had aged 10 years in 3 days. Linda's makeup was gone. George's shoulders looked smaller somehow. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Linda whispered, "Please." It was the smallest I had ever heard her sound. I let them step inside, but I remained standing. Boundaries matter more when history is in the room. George started with the same old instinct. This has gotten out of hand, I said. Then use your next sentence carefully. Linda began crying almost immediately. Not the sharp, manipulative crying I had seen at family dinners, but the collapsed kind, like a structure finally unable to hold itself upright. I never thought it would go this far, she said. I never thought people would see us like this. There it was again. See us. Not lose you, not hurt you. See us. I looked at her and said, Mom, do you hear yourself? Even now, your pain is still about the audience. That made her stop. George looked away. Silence sat between us for several seconds, heavy and clean. Then I did something I should have done years earlier. I named everything plainly. You trained me to accept less love than other people received from you. You made me pay in obedience for scraps of approval. You let Sophie talk to me like I was disposable because it served the family hierarchy. And when I finally refused, you called it betrayal. No one interrupted. Good. They needed to hear the unedited version. George rubbed his face and said, without looking at me, the debt is ours. We were drowning. We thought if you cared enough, you'd help. I said, you didn't ask for help. You attached a price tag to belonging. He nodded once. That was the first real concession. Linda spoke next, voice shaking. I was proud of Sophie because she made life look easy. And every time you struggled, I resented how messy it felt. I am ashamed of that. That sentence hit harder than any apology performance could have, because it was ugly, specific, true. I said, then say it where the people who watched you pretend can hear it too. George closed his eyes. If we do that, everything we built. I cut him off. Everything you built is already collapsing. The only question is whether anything honest survives it. Monday morning, they posted the video. All three of them. George looked sick. Linda looked wrecked. Sophie looked like she wanted to disappear. They admitted the text. The debt demand. The exclusion. George said, I asked my daughter to pay for the right to attend a family event, and that was cruel. Linda said, I told my daughter not to show her face when she couldn't do what we demanded. Sophie said, barely able to get the words out. I called my sister useless because I thought protecting the family image mattered more than protecting her. The internet did not suddenly become kind, but something changed. Not forgiveness. Gravity. The truth had landed where it belonged. By afternoon, Sophie officially lost her job. George's final active client terminated their contract. Linda resigned from 2 volunteer groups before they could vote her out. And me? I got an email from a media channel asking to license my story, plus 3,000 messages from people saying, you said what I never could. Tell me, when people finally apologize only after consequences arrive, do you think that's remorse? Or just fear with better wording? Comment below. Should Kendra ever let them back into her life after this? The strangest part of revenge is that when it finally arrives, it doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like silence after machinery stops. Tuesday morning, for the first time in years, my phone wasn't full of commands. No one demanded. No one belittled. No one told me what role I was allowed to play. I made coffee and sat by the window in my apartment while sunlight moved slowly across the floor, and I realized I had spent so much of my life bracing for impact that peace itself felt unfamiliar. The apology video kept spreading. Some people said my parents were brave for admitting the truth. More people said they were only brave because public collapse had removed every other option. Sophie's termination became a minor local talking point after someone connected her online messages to the brand she represented. George's business reputation was damaged badly enough that his partner began legal steps to separate from him completely. Linda's retirement, which was supposed to launch her into a season of admiration and community praise, became a case study in how quickly image can rot when the foundation underneath it is contempt. I should tell you something ugly and honest. Part of me wanted that. Not just accountability. Ruin. I wanted them to sit in the loneliness they had trained me to survive. I wanted Sophie to feel doors close. I wanted George to hear money slipping away and finally understand what it means when someone powerful decides you are worth less. I wanted Linda to discover that a polished smile cannot outlive recorded truth. And when those things started happening, I did not cry for them. I did not rush in to save them. I did not perform mercy to prove I was the better person. I let cause meet effect. That mattered, because for most of my life, every consequence in that family had been redirected downward until it landed on me. Their stress became my blame. Their debt became my test, their shame became my role. For once, the weight returned to its owners. Over the next week, my story changed my life in ways I hadn't planned. A trauma-focused podcast invited me on. A small publisher asked whether I had ever considered writing about family scapegoating. A creator account encouraged me to start sharing more videos about emotional abuse, image-driven families, and reclaiming your voice after years of being mislabeled. Mia, of course, was the first person to say it out loud. "Do you understand what you did?" she asked over takeout in my kitchen. "You didn't just expose them. You built a door for other people." I laughed because that sounded too grand. But then my inbox filled with more messages from daughters, sons, sisters, and even mothers who had seen themselves in my story. People wrote things like, "I thought I was the difficult one until I heard your father's words," and "My family always called me dramatic when I objected to being treated unfairly. Your videos gave me language." A brand deal came next. Not a huge one, but enough to make me blink at the number. Then another. Then interview requests. Then speaking opportunities. For the first time, the pain my family had used to shrink me began generating something they could never control. Freedom, money, reach, identity. I became, almost accidentally, the kind of influencer they would have mocked until they realized it meant I was no longer financially vulnerable to them. That irony kept me warm at night. About 10 days after the apology video, Sophie asked if we could meet. I said yes, but only in public. We sat at a coffee shop where the espresso machine hissed between silences. She looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of all the little status signals she used to wear like armor. No work badge, no polished certainty, just a tired woman with a cup cooling between her hands. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. Good, I thought. We were finally speaking the same language. "I was cruel because it was rewarded," she continued. "Every time I echoed what Mom and Dad wanted, I got approval. And every time you resisted, they made you the problem. I got used to living above the floor because they built you underneath me." That was the most intelligent thing she had ever said to me. I appreciated it more than any dramatic sobbing. "And now?" I asked. She looked down. "Now I know I can't build a self out of being the favored one. There's nothing left when the system breaks." I didn't comfort her. Some truth should stand without padding. I simply said, "That realization is yours to live with, not mine to soften." When George called later that week, I answered only because I wanted to hear whether he had learned anything besides fear. "I'm selling the boat," he said abruptly. I nearly smiled. The boat had always been his symbol of status, his proof to the world that he was doing better than he actually was. "We're restructuring debts," he continued. "Your mother is in therapy. I started too." I let the silence stretch. Then he said the one sentence I had needed from him years ago. "I treated you like a burden because I was ashamed of my own failures." That did not repair anything, but it clarified the map. Linda sent me a handwritten letter I read twice before putting away. In it, she admitted she had loved admiration more than honesty and order more than intimacy. She wrote, "I made the daughter who was easiest to display feel like the daughter who was hardest to keep." That line stayed with me, not because it absolved her, because it named the crime accurately. So where did all of this leave us? Not reconciled, not healed, not some fake movie ending where everybody cries and hugs in a sunlit kitchen. That would have betrayed the truth as much as their lies did. Here is the truth. Sophie lost her job and many of the friendships attached to her image. George and Linda lost business, social standing, and the illusion that they could mistreat me without witnesses. They publicly apologized because their private cruelty finally became expensive. And I became stronger, visible, and financially freer than I had ever been. I did not get everything back. Childhood doesn't return. Trust doesn't regenerate on command. But I got something they never intended me to have: authority over my own story. Do I speak to them now? Sometimes on my terms, in limited doses, with boundaries so clear they could cut glass. Do I trust them? No. Trust is earned in quiet consistency, not panic after exposure. Did I forgive them? That depends what you think forgiveness means. I release the need to beg for their love. I release the fantasy that one perfect conversation could turn them into the family I deserved. I release the role they wrote for me, but I did not erase what they did, and I did not protect them from the memory of it. That, to me, is enough. And on Friday night, the same Friday I had been told not to show my face, I received one final text from the family group chat, a message from Linda that simply said, "We should have been proud to have you there." I looked at it for a long time before replying with the coldest, honest sentence I have ever written. "You should have thought of that before I stopped needing your invitation." So now I'm asking you, if you were in my place, would you ever give them a real second chance? Or would you let them live forever with the version of me they almost destroyed? Comment below. Should Kendra forgive, keep her distance, or make them prove themselves for years before they earn even 1 inch back? At Revenge Argon, our team is working hard to create meaningful, emotionally powerful stories that leave a lasting impact on viewers. We are committed to making it clear that these are fictional stories designed to share valuable lessons, inspire reflection, and deliver educational messages in an engaging way. The villain in this story is especially frustrating because the cruelty feels so personal, cold, and deliberate, making the betrayal even more painful to watch. Characters like this often believe they will never face consequences, which is why their downfall feels so satisfying. If you were in Kendra's place, how would you deal with a person like that?